The Wooden Thunder. When PT boats shocked the Japanese Navy, December 1942. Solomon Islands Pacific Theater Technology. Shocked December 7th, 1942. 21:30 hours. Iron Bottom Sound. Lieutenant Rollin Westholm's hands trembled slightly as he gripped the wheel of PT-109, the mahogany vibrating beneath his palms with the throaty rumble of 3 Packard engines. 18 months of Pacific combat had taught him to trust his instincts. And tonight, every instinct screamed danger. The tropical air hung thick and oppressive around the Solomon Islands, broken only by the phosphorescent wake streaming behind 8 American PT boats cutting through the black water at 30 knots. To his right, PT-37 under Lieutenant Lester Gamble maintained perfect formation. To his left, the youngest faces he'd ever commanded, boys really, 19 and 20 years old, crouched at their battle stations, trying to look confident. Ensign Bryant Larson leaned close to Westholm's ear, his voice barely audible over the engine noise. "Sir, radio reports 11 Japanese destroyers inbound. They're calling it another Tokyo Express run. 11 destroyers." Westholm's methodical mind calculated the impossible odds. Each enemy warship stretched over 300 feet of steel armor, bristling with 5-inch guns and anti-aircraft batteries. Combined, they displaced over 22,000 tons of Imperial Japanese Navy fury, racing south to resupply their garrison on Guadalcanal. Against them, 8 wooden boats, 80 feet of plywood and mahogany, each weighing barely 50 tons. The comparison seemed almost insulting, like sending hornets against eagles. But Westholm knew something the Japanese didn't. Something that would fundamentally alter the course of naval warfare in the Pacific. These weren't ordinary patrol boats. They were floating lightning bolts, capable of 40 knots, 10 knots faster than any destroyer afloat. More importantly, they carried 4 Mark 8 torpedoes each, weapons designed to crack the hull of a battleship. Radio operator Carl Barthold, just 21 years old, watched their gunner methodically packing his personal belongings. "That guy has me spooked," he would later recall. It was like watching a man look at his possessions for the last time. The methodical nature that had kept Westholm alive through 18 months of combat couldn't shake one terrifying question. Were they about to witness the birth of a new kind of warfare, or their own destruction? As PT-109's engines reached full throttle, pushing the wooden hull through increasingly rough seas, Westholm had no way of knowing that in the next 4 hours, his tiny flotilla would accomplish something unprecedented in naval history. They were about to prove that speed, stealth, and audacity could triumph over size, armor, and tradition. The Japanese had no idea what was coming for them in the darkness. Context: the Tokyo Express stranglehold. For months, the Japanese had owned the night in these waters. Their Tokyo Express, fast destroyer runs under cover of darkness, had turned Iron Bottom Sound into an Imperial Japanese Navy highway. While American forces controlled the daylight hours, sunset belonged to Captain Raizo Tanaka and his destroyer squadrons. Captain Raizo Tanaka stood on the bridge of his flagship destroyer, scanning the horizon with practiced eyes. At 52, he was the master of night naval warfare, having run supplies to Guadalcanal for 4 months without significant opposition. His record was flawless: 27 successful supply runs, 0 losses to enemy surface action. Tanaka's confidence wasn't misplaced. His destroyers represented the finest night-fighting vessels in the world. Equipped with the legendary Long Lance torpedoes, superior optics, and crews trained specifically for nocturnal combat, they had systematically outfought every American surface force sent against them. The Japanese advantage destroyer length, 300-plus feet, displacement, 2,000-plus tons, main armament, 5 5-inch guns, maximum speed, 35 knots. Crew, 200 plus trained sailors. Night vision, superior optics. But as Tanaka's 11 destroyers raced south at 30 knots, loaded with supplies and reinforcements, American naval intelligence was tracking their every move. At Henderson Field on Guadalcanal, Lieutenant Commander Alan Montgomery studied the latest reconnaissance reports with growing excitement. "Gentlemen," Montgomery addressed the PT boat commanders gathered around a makeshift table in the sweltering operations tent. "Tonight we're going to try something that's never been attempted in naval warfare." The plan was revolutionary in its simplicity. Instead of engaging the Japanese destroyers in traditional surface combat, where American forces had repeatedly lost, the PT boats would use their speed advantage to get inside the enemy formation, launch torpedoes at point-blank range, and disappear back into the darkness before the Japanese could respond. The disposition of the boats at the time was considered the best possible, Westholm would later report, though privately he harbored serious doubts about their chances. The PT boats themselves were marvels of American innovation. Designed by the Electric Boat Company and built by Elco Naval Division, they represented a completely new approach to naval warfare. Their plywood construction, 17 layers of mahogany planking, made them incredibly light, yet surprisingly strong. More importantly, wood didn't show up well on primitive radar systems. Ensign Bryant Larson watched the crew of PT-109 make their final preparations. The night actions meant limited visibility with patrol sections scattered over a wide area, he observed. Each man dealt with pre-combat nerves differently. Some cleaned weapons obsessively, others stared silently at photographs from home. The Americans had one crucial advantage the Japanese couldn't: anticipate, speed. The PT boats' 3 Packard WW2 engines, the same power plants used in racing cars, could push the lightweight hulls to over 40 knots. This wasn't just faster than Japanese destroyers. It was faster than anything the Imperial Navy had ever encountered in surface combat. As the 8 PT boats formed up in the growing darkness, their crews removed defensive ammunition to make room for extra torpedoes. This wasn't just confidence. It was a calculated bet that their speed would keep them alive. They planned to get close enough to guarantee hits, then outrun any pursuit. At 2200 hours, radar operators on Guadalcanal reported the Japanese formation 60 miles north and closing. Tanaka's destroyers maintained their standard formation, a battle line that had proven unbeatable against conventional American naval forces. But tonight, convention was about to meet revolution. As PT-109 throttled up to attack speed, Westholm could feel the boat lifting slightly out of the water, riding on a cushion of spray and phosphorescence. Behind him, 7 other wooden thunderbolts matched his speed, their wakes creating a pattern of light that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. The Japanese destroyers appeared on the horizon as dark silhouettes against the star-filled sky, their massive forms moving with the confidence of predators who had never encountered a threat they couldn't handle. That was about to change forever. 2,245 hours. First contact. The sea erupted into chaos. PT-109 screamed toward the Japanese formation at 42 knots, her Packard engines howling like banshees as Westholm pushed every ounce of power through the lightweight hull. The phosphorescent wake behind them blazed like liquid fire, a trail of light that would have made them perfect targets if the Japanese had been looking at water level. They weren't. Captain Tanaka's destroyer crews, trained for years to fight aerial threats, swept their searchlights desperately across the empty sky while the real danger approached from the waves below. Their anti-aircraft guns, massive 25mm and 40mm weapons designed to shred incoming bombers, literally could not depress low enough to target the racing PT boats. "Range, 800 yards," Larson shouted over the engine noise. his voice barely audible as PT-109 closed the distance to the lead destroyer at an impossible rate. The Japanese warship loomed larger every second. 320 feet of steel armor, bristling with guns that couldn't aim low enough to save her. At 600 yards, the Japanese finally understood what they were facing. Searchlights swung down from sky to sea, catching PT-109 in a brilliant cone of white light. For one terrifying moment, Westholm felt like an insect pinned to a board, completely exposed, nowhere to hide. Throttle up to make the final sprint to distance less than 1,000 yards became the standard PT boat doctrine, born in this moment of absolute terror and absolute opportunity. Machine gun fire erupted from the destroyer's superstructure. Not the massive main batteries, but small caliber weapons, the only guns that could engage such a low, fast target. Tracer rounds carved brilliant lines through the tropical air, but PT-109's radical speed and evasive maneuvering made her nearly impossible to hit. At 400 yards, point-blank range for naval combat, Westholm made his decision. Fire torpedoes. All 4 fish. The Mark 8 torpedoes dropped into iron-bottom sound with barely a splash, their electric motors whirring to life as they raced toward the Japanese destroyer at 46 knots. Each carried a 643-pound warhead, enough explosive power to break the back of any warship afloat. Captain Tanaka watched in stunned disbelief as the tiny wooden boat released 4 white wakes directly at his flagship. In 27 years of naval service, he had never seen anything like it. Such a small vessel attacking such a large one at such close range. It violated every principle of naval warfare he had ever learned. PT-109 didn't wait to observe the results. The instant her torpedoes were away, Westholm threw the wheel hard to port and opened all 3 engines to maximum power. The wooden boat literally flew across the wavetops, spray cascading over her low hull as she executed a high-speed escape that no destroyer could match. Behind them, Lieutenant Lester Gamble, in PT-37, was executing his own attack run on a second destroyer. His approach was even more audacious, coming in from the port quarter at an angle that would either result in certain destruction or certain success. The Japanese destroyer Teruzuki, flagship of the rear section, found herself under attack from 2 directions simultaneously. PT-37's first torpedo struck near the aft section with a tremendous explosion that lit up the night sky like artificial daylight. The concussion threw Captain Tanaka to the deck of his bridge, unconscious from the blast. What happened next defied all expectations of naval combat. PT-48, following up Gamble's attack, suffered complete engine failure just as she came under fire from 3 Japanese destroyers simultaneously. Dead in the water, she should have been annihilated instantly. Instead, her crew fought back with everything they had. Her gunner, trapped in a burning gun tub with ammunition cooking off around him, stayed at his post to extinguish flaming cartridges before they could explode. Another crew member leaned out of the engine room to fire his rifle at the destroyer's bridge, a .3006 bullet against 300 feet of armored warship. PT-59, commanded by Ensign John McElfresh, found herself passing within 100 yards of the destroyer Kuroshio, an extremely dangerous situation for any wooden boat. The Japanese crew could literally see individual American sailors as their searchlights illuminated the tiny vessel. Instead of being intimidated, McElfresh ordered his crew to open fire with everything they had. Machine guns chattered, the 37mm cannon boomed, and even personal weapons joined the fight. The sight of such a small vessel attacking such a large one so aggressively stunned the Japanese destroyer crew into momentary inaction. That moment was enough. PT-59 escaped into the darkness, leaving behind a destroyer whose crew would spend the rest of the night trying to understand what they had just witnessed. 2,301 hours. Teruzuki's death. The explosion that killed the destroyer Teruzuki was unlike anything the Japanese Navy had experienced. PT-37's torpedo, striking near the aft magazines, triggered a massive secondary explosion that could be seen for miles. The blast was so powerful it lifted the destroyer's stern completely out of the water before breaking her back. Massive explosion. Powder magazines. Kingston valves opened, read the Japanese damage report. Of Teruzuki's 356-man crew, only 196 could be rescued. The remaining 156 were forced to swim to shore or drown in the dark waters of Iron Bottom Sound. For the first time in the Pacific War, a capital ship of the Imperial Japanese Navy had been sunk by American PT boats. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. Japanese destroyer crews, who had dominated night warfare for months, suddenly found themselves vulnerable to an enemy they couldn't effectively fight back against. As dawn broke over the Solomon Islands, the results of the night's action became clear. The vaunted Tokyo Express had been stopped cold. No supplies reached the Japanese garrison on Guadalcanal. Captain Tanaka's perfect record was shattered forever. Most shocking of all, not a single American PT boat had been lost. 8 wooden vessels had engaged 11 steel destroyers and emerged victorious, revolutionizing naval warfare in a single night. The age of the battleship was ending. The age of speed and stealth had begun. Immediate aftermath. Admiral William Bull Halsey's reaction was immediate and unequivocal. They are performing heroic services. Silver stars were awarded to crew members who had stayed at their posts under impossible circumstances. But the real recognition came from an unexpected source: the enemy themselves. Captain Raizo Tanaka, the master of Tokyo Express warfare, found his at-sea career effectively ended by that single night's action. The man who had run supplies to Guadalcanal 27 times without significant loss was reassigned to shore duty, never again to command destroyers in combat. The psychological transformation was complete and irreversible. Japanese destroyer crews, who had approached every night action with confidence born of months of victories, now scanned the waters nervously for the telltale phosphorescent wakes of approaching PT boats. The hunters had become the hunted. The revolution in numbers. Before December 7th, 1942. Tokyo Express, 27 successful runs. Japanese night victories, 100%. PT boat effectiveness, untested. After December 7, 1942. Tokyo Express disrupted. First time. Capital ship sunk by PT boats. First time. New naval doctrine, speed over armor. The success led to immediate tactical changes throughout the Pacific theater. PT boat squadrons received priority for new equipment, experienced crews, and the most dangerous missions. What had begun as an experimental program became the spearhead of American naval operations in restricted waters. Lieutenant Rollin Westholm, whose methodical nature had questioned their chances of survival, found himself transformed into a pioneer of modern naval warfare. His detailed after-action reports became required reading at the Naval War College, teaching future generations of officers that innovation and audacity could triumph over tradition and firepower. The night actions meant limited visibility with patrol sections scattered over a wide area, Ensign Bryant Larson observed, but this limitation had become their greatest strength. Invisibility was the new armor. Speed was the new artillery. The ripple effects extended far beyond the Solomon Islands. Japanese naval doctrine, built around large ship engagements and night surface actions, had to be completely reconsidered. Resources were diverted to develop countermeasures against small, fast attack craft, resources that couldn't be used for offensive operations. Perhaps most importantly, the success demonstrated that American industrial innovation could overcome Japanese tactical superiority. The PT boats represented everything American manufacturing did best: mass production of lightweight, fast, technically sophisticated weapon systems operated by young, aggressive crews. Captain Kohei Hanami, who would later command the destroyer Amagiri in the famous collision with PT-109 that nearly killed future President John F. Kennedy, would spend the rest of his life reflecting on this moment when naval warfare changed forever. Post-war, as mayor of his hometown, he would write to JFK, "I take this opportunity to pay my profound respect to your daring and courageous action." The wooden thunder of PT boat engines had announced more than just a new tactic. It had proclaimed the arrival of a new kind of warfare where speed, innovation, and courage could overcome size, tradition, and superior numbers. Today, as we watch modern conflicts unfold with drones, cyber warfare, and asymmetric tactics, the lesson of December 7th, 1942, remains as relevant as ever. Innovation doesn't just change how wars are fought, it changes who can fight them and who can win them. Lieutenant Westholm's terrifying question, were they witnessing the birth of new warfare or their own destruction, had been answered definitively. They had witnessed both: the destruction of traditional naval combat and the birth of modern asymmetric warfare. The sound of those Packard engines racing across Iron Bottom Sound echoed into the future, a wooden thunder that announced the dawn of a new age in human conflict. The legacy lives on every time a small, agile force defeats a larger conventional enemy through speed and innovation. The spirit of those PT boat crews lives on. From modern naval special operations to asymmetric warfare tactics, the lesson remains: in the right hands, with the right strategy, David can still defeat Goliath.